So good afternoon. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Winchester and is made possible by a generous grant from the Cummings Foundation. My name is Lynn Brodsky, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's candidate forum. We will start with a debate among the three candidates running for 2 seats on the Select Board, and then we will hear introductions from candidates who are running unopposed for seats on the School Committee and the Planning Board. Finally, we will have the opportunity to mingle and discuss current issues for the town, and you can see numbers 1 through 8 pinned to the curtains around the perimeter of the room, and those are for the precincts, and voters and town meeting candidates can meet at the number representing your respective precinct. And if you're not sure which is your precinct, over by the door there are some maps, and you can figure out which is your precinct. And at tables on your right, that's over here, our state legislators will be available for informal office hours. And also over there is a representative from the town's master plan. They had wanted to be here to try to get the word out about the master plan. And so for the informal mingling after the formal speeches and debate, we'll have about an hour for that. And then everyone can leave at about 3:30. And so about the League of Women Voters. Next year, 2020, will be the 100th anniversary of the National League and also of our Winchester chapter. The League has always been a nonpartisan organization with a mission to promote government and social reform, public understanding of major policy issues, and participation by all eligible voters. We do not support or oppose any candidate or political party. Our recent activities have included assisting 80 Winchester High School students to register or pre-register to vote, a presentation to inform citizens about how to run for office, and of course our forums for voters to meet candidates running for local office. If this forum and our mission meet your needs or even inspire you, we encourage you to donate or become a member, and all people may join. And again, I would like to thank the Cummings Foundation as well as the staff here at the Jenks Center who've been really helpful in advising us how to set these events up. Some members of the Select Board were also extremely helpful with guidance and information. And the League of Women Voters volunteers who are here, this is all a volunteer activity. And we commend you, the voters, for your interest and involvement in civic affairs. And so now I would like to introduce our moderator, Liz Blumenthal. She's a member of the League of Women Voters of Arlington and a League-trained moderator. And she will introduce the candidates and explain the format and ground rules for the candidate forum.
Okay. Hello. So I will read brief biographies provided by each candidate, and then each candidate will present an opening statement of 1 minute and why they are running. The order of the opening statements was determined earlier by blind drawing numbers. Questions to candidates to follow the same order in rotation. Questions for candidates were submitted in advance by the public and reviewed by a panel of league members for relevance, fairness, balance, and conciseness. There will be 1 minute for each candidate response and 30 seconds for each candidate to rebut. I may on occasion allow a second round of rebuttals or ask a follow-up question depending on how the discussion has gone. Timekeepers will be assisting us in sticking to this format. We ask that the audience not ask any direct questions, nor applaud or make any other audible reactions during the debate. Once the debate has been completed, you are welcome to show your appreciation. The Select Board is the executive committee for the town. The Select Board studies and formulates policy and acts around many issues such as licensing and budgeting, and submits them to the town meeting for action. The Select Board delegates municipal management to the town manager, including all departments except the schools. The town manager, town council, and town comptroller are the only positions hired and supervised directly by the Select Board. The Select Board consists of 5 members, each serving for 3-year terms. 2 seats are open for election on March 26th. I will now read the biographies the candidates have submitted. Vincent Dixon came from Boston and Cambridge. Vince and his partner, Emily Ann, lived in Winchester since 2012. He earned associate's, bachelor's with honors, and master's degree in education from Harvard University. He has taught English, history, and civics in various capacities. He has operated a tour company and continues his work as a historian. He is in his 4th year as a member of the Winchester Finance Committee and has served on the Audit Committee. Last year, he ran for Governor's Council and single-handedly initiated a ballot question in our state representative district stating that health care is a right in Massachusetts. The question passed overwhelmingly. Amy Shapiro has lived in Winchester since 2012. She earned her bachelor's degree from Middlebury College and her master's in sports management and marketing from George Washington University. Is this mic working for everybody? Excuse me, I'm just double checking. Okay. Amy worked for ESPN on the show Pardon the Interruption. She later worked for New Balance and then Boys and Girls Clubs of America, establishing partnerships with local and national nonprofit organizations. These programs provide access to STEM education, social and emotional resiliency, physical fitness, and college and career readiness for kids all over the country. She currently serves as Director of Strategic Accounts at Linkage Incorporated, a company that fosters women leaders in Fortune 500 companies. She is a member of Town Meeting, Vice President of a nonprofit youth recreation program in Pennsylvania, and continues alumni support of Middlebury College. She lives with her husband Josh and her children who attend Winchester Public Schools and is involved with their participation in sports. Susan Verdicchio, did I say that right? Yes. Okay, Susan and her husband Shizuo have lived in Winchester for over 25 years, raising their 3 children who all attended Winchester Public Schools. Susan started as a parent volunteer at the Morocco School Library and went on to serve on the boards of McCall and Winchester High School Parent Associations and the steering committee of the League of Women Voters. Susan was elected to the school committee in 2013, serving as its chair in 2017-18 and its representative on the Educational Facilities Planning and Building Committee. She is a town meeting member from Precinct 1. Susan graduated from Brown University and Boston College Law School and practiced law in Boston for 6 years before moving to Winchester to start her family. The first opening statement will begin with Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Close. How about now? Better? Yes, ma'am. So first, I'd just like to thank the League for holding this forum. These forums for local candidates are a vital part of our civic life in Winchester, and a hats off to the League for holding them. And I'd also, again, like to thank the Jenks Center for opening their doors and making sure that the Jenks Center is really an intergenerational resource for Winchester. As was mentioned, I've lived here a long time, 25 years. I realize that's longer than I've lived anywhere. This is my town where my kids grew up, and I really care about its future, and that's why I'm running. I think a lot of good planning and analysis has gone on with the town center rezoning, with the Housing Partnership Board, the Housing Production Plan, and I'd like to bring my experience on the school committee with some complex decision making, but using a collaborative and really fact-driven approach to start implementing some of these plans.
Next, Amy Shapiro
Thank you.
will make an opening statement.
Thank you. So this is my first one, so I'm going to read. Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, and thank you, Susan and Vincent, for throwing your hat in the ring, and I'm excited to be up here with you both. So people often ask me why I'm running for select board and why now. So a quick story. In 2010, my family moved to Massachusetts from my hometown in Maryland, where my husband was named the men's soccer coach at Tufts. I had 2 babies and had left my family, my friends, my home, and my community. It was an isolating time until we found Winchester. As soon as we moved here, we felt that this amazing community opened its collective arms to our family and have not let go. This town, its schools, its people, its beauty and history is special. So I'm running for select board so that I can give back to the town that has given me so much. I have 3 kids in the Winchester schools, and there's no better time in my mind to step up to make Winchester an even stronger, more dynamic place now and into the future. I've learned so much about our town as a town meeting member, and I believe that Winchester is at a crossroads. We have a number of challenges, from population growth in our neighborhoods and our schools, a need for more affordable housing, infrastructure in need of repair, and rising costs of healthcare. But with challenges come opportunities, and as a member of the Select Board, I would draw from my career experience in building partnerships, positively impacting communities, and would bring purposeful, intentional leadership to this important position.
Thank you. Finally, Vincent Dixon will make his opening statement.
Thank you. I thank the League of Women Voters, and especially LWV Winchester, the Jenks Center, and its staff, WinCam, our Winchester Community Media Organization, their staff, volunteers for this program, the work creating it, and especially you, the audience, here, near, and far. I'm asking each and every one of you, your family, and your friends, to honor me with your vote for Select Board, because I believe I have the knowledge, skill, and temperament to join the board and start working on solutions that I've already been thinking and talking about. Nearly 4 years of service on the Winchester Finance Committee have shown me that this town has many great characteristics and some real challenges. My knowledge and my skills in strategic planning, finance, budgets, economics, and related disciplines give me a valuable depth of needed experience. My life, my career has always been and had a strong element of focus on solving problems, analyzing solutions, public education on issues, and forward-thinking progress. And I think this forum and my fellow candidates will be able to help all of you to understand that even better.
Now we start with the question and answer part of the forum. At the special town meeting, the Finance Committee estimated that an $8 million override could fund 2 to 4 years, while the tax increase would be permanent. What ideas do you have, and what assumptions would you examine to see if expenses can be cut to extend the time frame over which the proposed override can support the operating budget?
Okay, thank you. So I think as a town meeting member, I've really had the opportunity to really dive into the budget and look at what is being proposed. And I think that there's a lot of really smart, knowledgeable, thoughtful people that have put together this budget. And I believe, again, having seen it at town meeting, that we're in, we really do, we have a very conservative budget. I do think that, I believe that with this override, we need to make sure that it does last for as long as possible. And that might involve phasing in things, maybe not having everything in the first year, but phasing it over time. And I also think that a continuous look at our fiscal responsibility, constantly looking at the budget, and determining how we might be able to bring about efficiencies between the boards, the committees, the nonprofits in town, and working together to figure out how we can share services and really have the most efficient budget possible. But I think it's very important that this override, because it is a big ask of the town, and I do believe that we really need to make sure that we're using the money in the most responsible way.
This is an override. There has not been an operating override in town for over a decade. There are some voices who've said we're going to have to look at operating overrides a little more frequently. I would hope that's not necessarily the case. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, and I should point out that these are opinions of mine, not the official position of the Finance Committee, so that we don't have any conflicts there. But one of the things that encouraged me to run was a sense that the Finance Committee is a bit hamstrung by a lot of the challenges that we have. I think the 8 million operating and 2 million capital is a prudent reduction of the original challenge, but it should be a bridge to a broader series of choices where we recruit economic development to the town and take advantage of the zoning that was deliberately done to provide those opportunities. Look at some other issues. We are a growing town with a growing population, and for every 1,000 of additional residents, there have to be some headcount increases in fire officers and police. Thank you.
Okay, and Susan?
So I agree with both of my colleagues here that the $10 million override is an important, it's based on a real need. It would address a range of needs, both municipal and schools, as well as capital repairs. That's part of why it's so large. I think that it can be made to last, I hope, longer than a couple of years. It will go up 2.5%, and maybe we can live within that for a while longer. I also agree with Vince that we need to maybe look at actually implementing some of the planning and trying to nurture a bigger commercial tax base. That's not going to solve the problem, but it will help. And I think a lot of good plans have been laid, and I think we have a new opportunity with our new town manager, who has a background in this, to let her exercise her expertise and show us the way for actually nurturing some new retail, nurturing some more sort of arts type programming that would bring people, not just have new businesses, but attract people to town.
Okay,
So
thank you. So now we have an opportunity for each candidate to give up to a 30-second rebuttal. You don't have to give any rebuttal, but if you choose to, starting with Amy.
Okay, yeah, I just want, the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of why I think that these numbers are correct but that we have to be fiscally responsible is, just as in your own homes, having savings is really important because you never quite know what's going to happen. And we know now that there's some significant infrastructure projects that need to get done, some significant capital projects that need to get done, and the practice of using our free cash and our reserves to cover our budget is something that makes me quite uncomfortable. So so I think that that's another thing that I want to mention in terms of how we look at the override and the funding.
Briefly, an economic development director is, I think, very much needed in this town. You don't just change zoning and take advantage of it by it happening. You have to recruit. 01890 definitely has the kind of wealth that probably exists in Brookline and Cambridge and Newton, and they recruit businesses in many ways, and we need to do that here. I would like to also see some innovation in terms of having an endowment fund where some money is put aside that would be sequestered permanently to create a small additional source of revenue. We have, of course, the master plan coming up as well.
I'd just like to say that part of how we make this override last is we continue the spirit of collaboration between the schools, the town, FinCom, and look at perhaps some shared services. One of the things the schools are looking for is a technology director, someone to oversee all the technology. We're part of the town, and I'm thinking, and we're actually already talking about whether that position could be a shared position with the town. So I think there's a lot of creative minds and very financially astute people in town and working on these things on the Finance Committee and other places, and I think we can do that.
Question number 2. Oh, do you have a?
Nope.
Oh, you're same question, but on the revenue side. How might the town increase revenues to make our town's financial status more sustainable? Starting with Vincent.
I've already touched on the need for an economic development director, for putting some money aside into a long-term endowment fund. We should not ignore the fact that in this room we actually have the presence of the master plan. The master plan process, which has not been done for a long time in this town, will produce over the next 18 to 24 months a great deal of valuable information, data, and recommendations. We should be careful that we make measures and decisions over the next year or two that are implementable and won't be reversed by that and will be added to by the strength of the master plan. The master plan process will include an analysis of transportation. This town desperately needs to look at transportation services. Seniors have expressed that as a real issue. There is also, of course, some advocacy that has to be done regionally as well. I think that the legislative delegation of surrounding towns, including Winchester, Stoneham, Arlington, Concord, and Lexington, can push back on some of these issues. The Commonwealth has basically created some of the problems and pressure on housing by not fulfilling its role. We'll talk more about that.
Okay. Susan?
So on the revenue side, I think that one of the most important things to keep in mind is that, you know, people want to move into Winchester. It's a great town. I don't see why we couldn't be attracting people to come to Winchester for, like, I don't know, a film festival or for more interesting restaurants. So like Vince, I'm very hopeful that there'll be some economic development to help us. And also the town center train station, we're moving forward to get that have that renovated, have the MBTA renovate that. And I think once that gets moving, it'll be, you know, easier to, you know, build up the center business district. And part of how that happened was, you know, the town works very closely with our legislative delegation to keep pressure on. And I think we have to keep doing that and keep working with our legislative delegation to be sure that maybe Chapter 70, which is school funding, is increased as well.
I completely agree with Susan and Vincent. I think that the economic development is obviously very important. I also think that it's important to look at economic impact and how we can make Winchester a desirable place to come and visit, just as Susan was saying. You know, we have beautiful natural resources, we have great restaurants, great shops, and I think through an economic development plan and through Lisa Wong's leadership, I think we have a real opportunity to really market Winchester as a destination and not only support our small businesses that already exist, but also attract more. And I think through the master plan, as Vincent was saying, they're doing a retail gap analysis, which really will look at what type of retail will be sustainable in Winchester. And I think that that's incredibly important because we know that, you know, not every business can survive here necessarily. And I think that it's important to look at what our community needs and balance that with what will really work in our town.
There's time for rebuttal.
Briefly, I think one of the other things we have to look at down the road, a lot of people have made this town what it is by being loyal to it for decades or even generations. And I think ultimately we need to build the cash position so we can provide at least a modest residential tax exemption, as communities that have stronger cash flows have, to reward the people who've been loyal here. Those of us who are new are excited and pleased to be here, but we have to respect those who have been an important part of making this the foundation of what it is, and look at some of the other policies that are necessary. If we lose our reserve position, of course, that could in fact be a tax increase by higher borrowing costs.
Susan? Oh, okay. Okay. So question 3, in the context of the existing housing production plan, what additional recommendations do you have to address the supply of affordable housing in Winchester? And that'd be Susan started.
Well, I think it's important to move forward with the housing production plan. We need to get to that safe harbor of 10%. However, I don't think we need to do anything radical, because I think we need to wait for the master plan process to play out and understand, you know, a little bit better about what the rest of to bring all the neighborhoods together and understand how they feel about what can be built near them. But in the meantime, I think we could be doing some things like maybe crafting some zoning around allowing accessory apartments in existing homes and putting some strict controls on that, but those would add units sort of integrated into the existing housing stock throughout the town. That's been a goal of the housing partnership for a long time and part of the HPP. I also think we need to be sure that we carry out all of the pedestrian safety and traffic improvements so that when new buildings are done and we are, you know, adding to our affordable housing, that we have the infrastructure in place to handle that.
So as we know, the 10% threshold of affordable housing is something that's mandated by the state, so it's not something that we can turn a blind eye to. And I think it's actually really important for the vitality and diversity of our town. So I think that, I'm confident that we can develop projects that meet both the objectives of the town and the residents, and balance that with what, will still be appropriate for the values that we hold so dear in our town. I would work really closely with our state delegation, so Congressman Day and Senators Jalen and Lewis, and identify revenue from state sources to really determine what's available to us in that way, because that's going to be increasingly important as we go forward. And then I believe that the Winchester Housing Production Plan is a really great step, and I fully support the Municipal Housing Trust, so that we can actively participate in the local housing market and get involved and really get involved in projects that we think are appropriate for town.
I agree with my colleagues in terms of the need for addressing the affordable housing issues, but we can't ignore, again, the failure of the state to do its job. Governor Baker basically proposed a large package which got nowhere. He says he'd like to do something more with that, but it's not just a question of liking to do more. There are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and too often it's the state against one town at a time. There are probably 200 cities and towns outside of 495, many of which have thin, rural, declining populations that might well use some lower cost economic developments from greater number of residents so that we can have greater mix. This is not just a question of income inequality, which is part of the broader picture, but there's also a question of wealth inequality. And frankly, a lot of people may have some income but see this as a real risk. We should provide some housing. The Affordable Housing Trust and other policies are useful to that, but ultimately we have to expect that other parts of Massachusetts that are lower density have to have a part too.
For rebuttal?
I'd just like to maybe respond to what Vince just said, and I was actually kind of looking forward to the affordable housing being added as something that would allow people who are in Winchester now to downsize and continue to live in Winchester. So I think that's an important piece of our whole housing production plan, to be sure that, it's an opportunity to add smaller units that would be affordable to seniors who are here now. Not, look to other communities necessarily.
Yeah, I think as we saw in the needs assessment, affordability generally is really high on everyone's mind, and we want to make sure, I really, as a select board member, would want to make sure that everyone that wants to be in Winchester can stay here and can thrive. And I think that this community has so much to offer everyone. And so, I would work, like I said, to find other sources of revenue and to really determine ways that we can not only increase and try to get to that 10% and get to our safe harbor, but also, just make it feasible for our most vulnerable populations to really be able to stay here and thrive.
I think that one of the points that Susan is touching on is that perhaps affordable housing should be focused not so much just on the affordability, but also utilizing it as an opportunity to improve the diversity of this community. It's a great community, but it isn't anywhere near as diverse as the big cities. And long term, there is a problem in terms of students growing up in a school system that does not reflect the broader society, which they will grow into and be part of at a later point.
Question 4. What will you do to expand awareness of programs to provide property tax relief to seniors and to broaden eligibility for these programs? Starting with Amy.
So obviously, as we talk about the override, again, affordability and the tax increase is high on everyone's minds. And I think that in order to, I support the tax deferment program that's currently in place in Winchester. I think that Senator Lewis spoke to the select board a few weeks ago about the opportunity for a circuit breaker program for seniors who live in Winchester to give them a little bit of relief on taxes. And I think, again, I would work really closely to work with the Council on Aging, the Jenks Center, Senior Citizen Tax Committee, I would really want to meet with them regularly to make sure that I'm understanding what the concerns are for our senior citizens in town and really come up with policies that reflect their needs so that we can move forward and that they can thrive in town.
The three issues that I think are probably the most important to people in the senior center and the senior population, which is important but frankly affect everyone, are fire safety. We've had trouble keeping a sufficient level of staff because, frankly, like a lot of other positions in town, we're kind of cheaping out. We don't pay as much as perhaps people would like to have as a reward, and we lose people. The police were at the edge. One of the reasons for supporting the override is to keep a stable level of police or increase it slightly. Many of us knew Anna LaViolette, which was a wonderful person who died in a tragic accident. I think we need stronger traffic enforcement. There's been some increase by the police in that area, but I think we need more in that area. And ultimately, again, as I mentioned, transportation. Transportation is not really aided by having a commuter rail that on Saturdays and Sundays is once every 2 hours. I think we need to have a little more frequency there. But more importantly, the regional crossings to Arlington and Woburn and Stoneham, I think some regional opportunities exist, and we need to do something about that.
Susan?
So we have completed a very good needs assessment. The Council on Aging worked on that, and I think it then becomes the select board's role to continue that dialogue, as Amy mentioned, meet with people to be the hub where people, for town hall to be a hub where people of all ages can come and learn about things, or can, and it actually does outreach to various segments of the town. And so as part of that outreach, I think we should make it a lot more clear cut about what the requirements are for the various exemptions and senior tax relief. I think we could have Lisa Wong make a video and put it up there right on the website for the town, and people could listen to the video and understand what the options are. And we have Jenks, and if there was, as everyone has been hinting, that we need more sort of transportation like a shuttle bus, people could come in here and learn about the tax relief that's available as well. So that's how it would get the word out. That's what the question was.
Okay, for rebuttal, Amy?
Yeah, just to follow up on what Susan was saying, I think that there's opportunities to find. Obviously, the Jenks Center is a great resource to be able to come and talk to seniors and let them know what the new policies are around the tax question. I also think that we can work with these organizations, and I think it's really important that from a marketing perspective, which is sort of my background, marketing to the seniors and making sure that they understand what's available to them, and that could be done in a couple different ways. But I think making town hall accessible and really helping them understand how they can get to the select board, to the different boards and committees is really important too.
The intersection with Winchester Hospital is, of course, an important one as well, and we see the larger consolidation of healthcare institutions, Leahy having taken it over. I'd like to see a little higher pilot payment in lieu of taxes from Winchester Hospital through Leahy, and also deal with some of the policing problems we're having up there, which is putting somewhat of a strain on the town.
Okay. So question 5. What is your position on retiring the Winchester Sachems mascot? Did I pronounce that right? And replacing it with one that does not contain a stylized depiction or caricature of indigenous peoples or other specific ethnic group, starting with Vincent. Did I?
I think it's Vincent, right?
It's Vincent.
Okay. Many people tend to think of me as a white male, and I apparently present that way. But when I was growing up, my mother's family was of Polish-Ukrainian background, and most of my relatives spoke Polish first and English second. And so, of course, growing up in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of very bad jokes about dumb Poles. Mm-hmm. And that was an important thing. I remember my father summoning us and apologizing to my mother and myself, because if the Pope could be Polish, then he guessed the Polish people were good people. Positive modeling, regardless of your ethnic group and background, is very important. And I think if the Sachem model is a concern to Native Americans, maybe we ought to take it away, not because we're being politically correct, but out of respect to people. Ultimately, respect for every group is important. Education about these issues is crucial. And ultimately, if we respect everyone as an equal while recognizing their individuality, then you have the dynamic of the broader view of society and individual identity.
So I know that this has been a divisive issue in our town in the past, and everybody, I have 3 children who went through Winchester High School, and they all have sort of a different opinion about what's so important about a symbol, or this is racist, let's get rid of it. What I would like to see is, and it's tricky to do, but we would need to have a really good town-wide conversation and learn. One of the things I regret about my time at the school committees, we haven't had a chance to get to our social studies curriculum. I'd like to see our people, everyone learn in school more about what really went on with the colonists and Native Americans in this area. But if we can have a more historically informed conversation in the town, I think that would be the place to start, not to just sort of talk about should we keep it or should we get rid of it. I would actually like to see, and I see Mike Day is here, I would love to see the legislature have a commission to talk about Native American mascots and the whole history. And because it's not just our town, it's the state seal as well. So that's what I would love to see.
So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I'm a fan of the football team there. And so this has been an issue that I've sort of grown up with. And, I've talked to, during my time at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, I worked with our Native American Services Unit. So there are about 80 Boys and Girls Clubs on Native reservations across the country. And so I visited a few of them and spoke to Native Americans about this very issue because of my fandom of Washington's football team. I got a lot of mixed reviews, from them, but it was an unbelievably worthwhile conversation. And I think that, again, bringing people to the table from the schools, bringing, everyone together to really discuss this and have an authentic conversation about it. It's a really hard conversation. It's a really hard topic, but I think through conversation and really understanding where people are coming from on both sides and understanding, what they both are sort of wanting to see out of it, we can come to some sort of rational decision.
So for rebuttal?
One other thing, I think the idea of a commission is actually good because, of course, there are some people asking questions about the seal of Massachusetts itself. The name Massachusetts works pretty well because it's the people of the Great Hill, the Great Blue Hill, but some of the symbology in this crest of Massachusetts has been raised and questioned. And if we're going to look at one or two of these, we might as well look at all of them and set a new policy for what is now a postmodern era.
Anybody else? Okay. During the past year, one Winchester resident died, and several have been injured when vehicles collided with pedestrians. What ideas do you have to improve pedestrian safety in Winchester, starting with Susan?
Well, I think, as I have noted, that a lot of good planning has already been done, and I think it's mainly right now, and we need to get some of these things implemented, which is one of the reasons to support the override. Another thing, we've been looking at trying to make the town more hospitable to seniors and more walkable. Maybe look at widening sidewalks, look at more pedestrian crossings with the blinking lights. Again, we do need to let the master plan process work its way out and work its way through. But I think ultimately it's going to be sort of making the town more walkable and more sort of looking at the bigger picture about how we can get people from one place to another, maybe in a shuttle bus rather than walking as well. So it's a complicated issue, and we have a traffic committee in place, Traffic and Transportation Advisory Committee, let's come together and figure out how we can make Winchester more walkable for everybody, not just seniors.
Amy?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Susan said. And obviously, again, in the needs assessment, 38% of respondents identified pedestrian safety,
Right.
and 36% said traffic congestion was of high concern. And it's certainly of high concern to me. I have 3 kids, and I have one who goes to middle school and likes to walk and ride his bike to school. And so obviously traffic, we live on the other side of town, and so traffic is really of high concern to me, particularly during those rush hour times where the number of cars is just infinitely more than during the middle of the day. So I think that, again, the master plan is a great first step to really look at what we need. I think some of the ideas I think would be helpful are exploring ride sharing and carpooling options. I think that the Greenway Initiative Committee is doing really great work around the bikeways and expanding the bike paths, and then also doing some more to promote them to residents and making sure that people know that they're available and open for use. And again, working with our state delegation, we're putting Mike Day on the spot a lot. We all want to work with you, Mike.
You kept sitting in the front row.
Exactly. I just saw the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Grant Program. There's a Traffic Enforcement and Equipment Grant Program at the state level to look at things like distracted driving and seatbelt usage. So I think those are some really actionable ways that we can work on the traffic situation.
This is the areas I touched on earlier when the great tragic death of Anna LaViolette, the tremendous funeral that was sad that to lose somebody who was an older senior citizen who had in 4.5 years here in this town really made an imprint and created, she was one of those people in town you wanted to see and make part of your day. Public safety is very important. As I make my way about to evening meetings and sometimes outside the town because I'm a historian and go to many historic societies, we've noticed the fact that crosswalks and other markings deteriorate and don't get replaced. And I've actually filed, among many pieces of legislation, a bill that would look at measuring the lumens, the reflectivity of crosswalks, and ask the state to set some standards on that, perhaps provide some small funding to make sure that crosswalks and other important areas are meeting a particular reflectivity standard, not just when they're put down for the first time, but on a maintenance level. That's an important part of this.
For rebuttal, anybody? Volunteers regularly remove trash from the Aberjona River. Would you recommend or take any action to reduce the amount of litter in Winchester's waterways and open areas? Starting with Amy.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's do that. Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that I would love to talk to, various committees and people that are much smarter than I in this area. I haven't done a lot of work in this area, but I think that this is a beautiful town, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that we're working with our DPW, and we're working with our committees in town to ensure that we keep it that way. I think another thing I'll say, really, my 30 more seconds before the Oscar music starts. I think that there's a way that we can work with the schools to really use the schools to talk to the children about the importance of the trash. We have, obviously, with the receptacles in the downtown area that we could probably improve. They're a little gross, but I think that there's a way that we can really encourage our kids to take ownership of that. This is their town. They're the next generation, and they need to leave the town as they found it. And so I think that there's a way to really tell that story within our schools and really have the kids support those efforts as well.
I agree with Amy that the schools have to be part of this education effort, public education across the town for people. I've been part of the cleanup a couple of times, and it's pretty ugly, the stuff you find. It's not just a few pieces of paper or some broken glass. There's a lot else there. This is an important set of issues. Environmental responsibility is crucial. The shuttle bus and issues like that are certainly important in terms of that. And I think that we have to look at that long run because the density of development will change this town in some ways. We have to be careful that that's done in a controlled way. And I think one of the issues we have to look at, of course, is the recycling and trash issue, which has become a problem in the last year. The Chinese regime has basically said 0.5% pollution within the recycling stream. It has created a real crisis. It's costing this town and many other places additional money to take what was recycling away as potentially trash, creating some other headaches there. Perhaps in looking at that, we have to look at townwide trash or recycling collection in a different format.
I actually participated in Aberjona River Cleanup Day, and one year we actually pulled out a bicycle and a lot of shoes. I don't know why. So, like my colleagues here, I agree. It begins not with cleaning up, but with reducing what gets thrown away. And one of the things that the schools have been trying to do is to have more of those, refillable bottle. Instead of a bubbler, you can refill your water bottle. So let's reduce the number of plastic bottles from beverages in town. I think that is something that kids are learning, and we definitely need to take a look at how many receptacles are where, and be sure we have receptacles on the sports fields, and on walking routes to those. And I think also I really support the fact that we have the paper bag ban now. I'm really trying to use the reusable bags, and I think there's maybe a little less of those bags flying around. So I think that was a good idea.
For rebuttal, anybody? So the last question. In lieu of a traditional closing statement, we would like to ask you the following question. What question did we not ask you that you would really like to answer? Please tell us the question and your answer to it. Amy?
I think I went first last time.
Okay. So Vincent.
Did I?
Sorry.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
That's right. That's correct.
I think that we've tried to address all the different details, and I appreciate my colleagues' attention to detail here. There's a balance between the big picture and the detail. And I think that part of this is recognizing that as the town grows, part of the issues that involve municipal government are headcount. For every 1,000 people, there have to be some sense that there's going to be a few more teachers, a few more police, and a few more fire. You have to have a stronger finance to do that. Less people think that that is just what goes on in this particular situation. Boston and Cambridge, with a lot more opportunity, resources, and challenges, were nearly bankrupt 35, 40 years ago. They've turned things around, but perhaps have overdeveloped. We have to be careful to maintain a balance with neighborhood-friendly, commercial mixed businesses that will bring in tax revenue, and also look eventually at providing somewhat of a discount for residential tax exemptions over time, and recognize that municipal problems are complex.
Well, something that I had thought about a lot when I was trying to prepare for this was about the environment, and hoping that there might be a question about how we could make Winchester more actively involved in protecting the environment. I think we've done a good job having a flood mitigation plan. I think we need to finish that so that we get to get the full benefit of the plan. We have to build the full plan. We have some people who work very hard on our energy management committee and our climate advisory committee. I think it's time to we have a climate action plan that's getting a little old, along with all the other planning that we're doing. I think it might be time to take another look at our climate action plan. I think we might also take a look at trying to encourage more solar on rooftops in town. We did that for a while, and I guess partly because the cost of the panels has gone up, but I would like to see us look again at more solar. The EFPBC and the school committee worked hard to finally get solar to be installed on Vincent Owen and the high school, and I think that's a really important thing that our town has been doing it for years and should continue to do, and I wish it asked about that.
So Susan took mine, but it's okay. It's really fine. It's really fine. I have a different spin. So my question was more around what is happening in conversations at the national level that can really be sort of accessible here in Winchester. And so climate change was one of the ones that I really identified there. And so I think that, we've made huge progress in terms of energy efficiency in town over the last few years. And I think the Climate Action Advisory Committee, the Energy Management Committee have done amazing work to get our Gold LEED certification at the high school, to put the solar panels on the DPW building in VO recently, and with wind power as a renewable energy program in town. So I think that we've made huge strides. So I would really look forward to collaborating with those groups and just generally overall groups within town, other boards, committees, to really determine what these people are. I'm so impressed. And the more people that I meet in town that are volunteer public servants that are just really doing this because they care so much about our town, I'm really inspired. And I really look forward to working with them on climate, on all of the different opportunities that we have facing us in Winchester.
So now you can rebut to anybody's question that you answered, or
Okay,
everybody else
I'll take
answered.
the slot, not as a rebuttal perhaps, but as an addition. One other thing that is more complex, that reflects the fact that public services are complex, is the need to look at metropolitan solutions in our immediate region. There is a Cape Cod Regional Commission where many of the people in that area were faced with what they felt was overdevelopment and overpressure, and they created a federation of local towns and municipalities, which many people think has been effective. I think we need to do that here, as I already touched on, to actually have a regional commission. Among my pieces of legislation that I filed is looking at that. And I think together with the Mass Municipal Association, we can do some things in that area as well. Thank you.
Susan, anybody? No. So, thank you to the select board candidates whose commitment to leadership and civic engagement is to be applauded. So you may all applaud if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we will introduce candidates who are running unopposed. They will give a brief introduction about what they see as the challenges facing them in the offices they are about to assume and what they hope to achieve. Karen Bolognese, did I say your name right? Yes?
Karen Mariama Bolognese.
Karen, right, is running unopposed for the school committee. Karen Mariama Bolognese is mother to a daughter at McCall Middle School and two sons at Vincent Owen Elementary School. She earned a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Tufts University and a Master of Business Administration from University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree cum laude in English from Vanderbilt University. She has served as Assistant Vice President of Finance with Ford Motor Company's startup in the Philippines. She worked in Nagoya, Japan as a teacher and then in Tokyo, Japan as an interpreter, translator for a major Japanese life insurer. Karen and her husband, Ralph, moved to Winchester in 2011. Since 2012, she has served as a member of town meeting. She has been re-elected to the McCall School Council, on which she has worked to represent the diversity of the McCall community. At VO, she has spearheaded the school's International Night since its inaugural event in 2016. She also leads enrichment programming for the 4th and 1st grades and has helped develop the school's core values and mission statement. She led the effort to reinvigorate the science park at Vincent Owen and the establishment of the VO Butterfly Government. She joined the Board of Trustees for the Winchester Community Music School. Would you like to speak now?
Good afternoon. And thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for inviting me to participate in this event. As Liz mentioned, I've lived in Winchester since 2011. We had lived next door in Medford since 2004, but my kids all went to daycare and preschool in Winchester. So it was a natural choice when my oldest was starting kindergarten to move to this community where we had developed so many close relationships. When we came here, I really wanted to learn about town and to get involved. And that drove my interest in running for Precinct 6 in town meeting, which has been a great way over the last 7 years to meet people and to stay connected and to learn more about what is happening currently in the community. I've also volunteered extensively both at McCall and VO to keep tabs on my kids. It's really so that I can learn what's going on inside the schools and to meet the teachers who work so hard with all of our children. So I'm very excited for this chance to be a part of the school committee and continue to serve the children and families of Winchester in improving their educational experience. In particular, I'm interested in 3 things. First of all, inclusion. We usually hear that referring to students with different abilities, but I'd like to suggest that we also expand that to include those of diverse backgrounds as well. We have an international festival at 3 of our 5 elementary schools and at the farmers market, celebrating the backgrounds of our children and their families. VO alone has grown from 75 different cultures since when I helped start our own international night in 2016 to 85 cultures in its 3rd year. And this is just a microcosm of the array of families who are in town or who are coming to town. I would like to help ensure that all those who have children in our school system, whether new to town, new to the country, or with special needs, have a voice in their child's educational experience. Second, I'm interested in a fiscally responsible budget. I've been visiting with the principals of each school to take a tour and to better understand the needs of each school and the unique challenges around each of their budgets. I will work closely with other members of the school committee, the superintendent, school administrators, and the staff to make sure we understand their input to school and to student needs in the upcoming years. As a former vice president for finance at Ford Motor Company's startup in the Philippines, I will bring my financial knowledge and discipline to help us start to plan for our school spending in the longer term. I'd like to see us look beyond just 1 year so that we can plan ahead for any foreseeable risks. Then we can be better prepared to inform parents and community members and to maximize the resources that our taxpayers provide us. Finally, the social and emotional health of our students really deserves our special attention. In a community like Winchester, our students face a lot of pressure. Since my daughter was in 1st grade 6 years ago, I've heard about how the homework load, for example, ramps up significantly at middle school and also again in high school. Well, now she's in 7th grade, and we're finding that the homework load is still quite heavy. So this is all on top of navigating increasingly tricky social waters and pressures as our students move from grade to grade. These kinds of things cause undue stress to our kids. In more recent years, I've heard we'd like to put together a committee to look into the homework load across the grade levels. I'd like to see this committee become a reality and really examine homework, test, and teacher coordination at the elementary school level and the secondary school levels. Let's find the right balance for our children. I'd also like school committee to advocate for the prudent use of technology for students. It's a real challenge to encourage students to use technology well in middle school or even now in 5th grade with BYOD, Bring Your Own Device, when there's the siren call of video game or YouTube or social media to distract them. As for the override, I support the override, not only from a school perspective, but also as a citizen of town. This is really about the whole town, one Winchester. We need adequate patrol officer staffing, safe and well-maintained sidewalks, money to replenish our capital reserves. From my perspective as a parent and school committee hopeful, we need strong schools because they are the bedrock of our community. They draw families like mine who believe in the value of education, and they keep our property values high. As a member of school committee then, I will work for inclusion of our diverse community, a fiscally responsible budget and business plan, and our children's social and emotional health. However you may lean on the issues that Winchester faces, I really encourage you to vote March 26th. And of course, I'd really appreciate it if you vote for me. And I look forward to serving you as well in the upcoming years. Karen Bolognese for School Committee. And thank you very much for your time.
Heather, next, okay. Heather Hannon is running unopposed for re-election to the Planning Board. Heather is an urban planner with degrees in architecture from Princeton University and urban planning from Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. Heather, her son, their 2 daughters, and her mother moved to Winchester 2 years ago. Heather came from San Diego, moving to the Boston area in 2004. She has worked on campus planning and transportation planning for 2 local universities, for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and most recently as a consultant for the United States Department of Transportation. Last spring, Heather was appointed to fill a vacancy on the Planning Board. She has greatly enjoyed her participation in town government and looks forward to another year of service to the community. Heather.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. After spending the past year as a member of the Planning Board, I'm happy to be running for the open 1-year term. I feel that as a member of the Planning Board, my role is to act as a steward of the urban design and land use decisions that make our town a beautiful place to live, work, and visit. As members of the Planning Board, our tasks include evaluating residents' and developers' proposed changes to existing buildings and land uses, evaluating proposals for new development, drafting changes to the town's current zoning, and providing guidance on the master plan for our town. As stewards, we each bring our own expertise to help facilitate a public process that respects individual property owners and residents, while also prioritizing the needs of the entire community and respecting the history of this place. In truth, each of us is simply passing through, so it's important that we consider the long-term effects of any changes that we make while we are here. I moved here with my family for a variety of reasons that are perhaps similar to some of the reasons why each of you chose to live in this town. I'm going to list some of them because I think these characteristics have high value and are worth preserving or in some cases enhancing. These are all also areas that relate to the work that we do on the Planning Board. The first reason that my family and I moved here is that we were looking for a historic 2-family property rich in architectural character. We saw benefits to having our 3 generations live in close proximity to one another, and we had admired the high quality of historic architecture that we had seen throughout Winchester. I also have a special love for New England's 2- and 3-family houses. But in our town, these types of buildings are not only rare, but sometimes risk being demolished. Beyond the historic nature of these properties, the size and the design of them is a great example of the kind of scale that would help us respond to our current housing demand. Further, more small-scale multifamily housing would help us reach our goals for a diversity of unit sizes and incomes. In Winchester, achieving greater income diversity is an issue that I believe warrants our attention and our support. Another area that needs our support is the preservation of historic buildings, as well as preserving their scale. We are seeing so many smaller homes knocked down and replaced with larger homes, and this makes it more and more difficult for people earning middle incomes to move here. Also, much of the new development that we are seeing is of disappointingly low architectural design quality, and I know that we can do better. The second reason we moved here was for the 2 commuter rail stations. And despite these invaluable assets, 70% of Winchester residents drive alone in a car to work. In order to prioritize the maintenance and rehabilitation of the stations, we can think about how to increase ridership so that these stations matter to more of our residents. One way to do this is to support denser housing that's within walking distance to the stations. In some cases, this might mean changing the zoning from single family to allow for 2 or 3 unit dwellings. It also might mean allowing owners of single-family homes to convert garages or attics to second units on their property. I realize that some residents may not currently support this idea, but I believe it's a wonderful opportunity for a community discussion because it would achieve the added density without changing the look and the feel of our historic scale. Other ways to increase ridership are to increase connectivity and transportation choices. Safer streets for walking and biking can encourage more people to use transit. I also look forward to prioritizing and implementing strategies from the recently completing housing production plan. The third and fourth reasons we moved here were walkability and open space. We feel privileged to be able to walk or bike to beautiful places such as the Fells, the Town Forest, the Mystic Lakes, the New Greenway, as well as the libraries, schools, restaurants, shops, and businesses. I realize that not all parts of town are walkable, so I see this as an opportunity for enhancement as we think long-term. Many neighborhoods need sidewalks, crosswalks, bus stops, and bike lanes to give people sustainable and active ways to get around town, as well as traffic calming measures to increase safety. Many residents would also benefit from a shuttle loop where they could hop on and off to get to the places that they most often go. Because beautiful open space is one of the reasons that we love living here, I believe it's important that our community strives to preserve large mature trees and the little open space that we have left. From 1971 to 1999, our town lost almost 350 acres of open space and forest. What's most shocking is that our population was at its highest in 1970. It's easy to take open space for granted until a neighbor cuts down an old tree that had shaded your yard, or a developer clear cuts all the trees on a neighboring parcel. In closing, this is just a taste of some of the issues that I feel strongly about and look forward to discussing with all residents and with members of the Planning Board. Each of us live here for different reasons and we love different things about our town. But I believe that community discussions that are facilitated by a fair and open public process will help people to learn that they have much more in common than they thought. As the Planning Board and Master Plan Steering Committee help guide the master plan over the next year, I'm excited to hear from you about what you love about Winchester and all the issues that matter to you. Together we can develop a set of shared values and incorporate everyone's ideas into a long-term vision for our town, as well as a list of actionable strategies going forward. Thank you.
Diab, am I saying your name right?
Sure, yeah.
Diab Jarius is running unopposed for re-election to the Planning Board. Diab Jarius has lived in Winchester for 22 years. He received a bachelor's degree in physics from Wayne State University and a PhD in astronomy from the University of Michigan. He has worked at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory as a calibration scientist supporting NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory since 1991. Diab's interest in town government was primed when he and other Winchester residents formed the Winchester Hamilton Farm Interest Group to oppose development of Wright Lock Farm, then called Hamilton Farm. He has been a town meeting member for more than 10 years and a member of the Winchester Planning Board for 3 years, and is concluding a one-year term as the chair of that board. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I wish I'd written what Heather had said, but I didn't, so you'll have to put up with what I wrote. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the League for the opportunity to engage with the voters of Winchester. When I first moved to Winchester, I honestly didn't know much about the town, its history, its neighborhoods, its governmental structure. Winchester was near enough to work that I could bike, and my partner and I found a house we liked, probably the last fixer-upper in Winchester. It was in our budget, and we bought it. I've always been interested in housing, and Winchester is the first place I've lived that so markedly reflects the evolution of American society over the last 175 years. There are neighborhoods of grand mansions of the wealthy, workers' neighborhoods from the industrial age, mass developments of the 60s, remnants of an early agricultural period, and McMansions of our time. Whatever we think of as Winchester, it's important to recognize that it is an image of a particular moment in time. Winchester has changed dramatically over time, and it is still changing. What we see around us is the result of external forces, the changing nature of our economy and demographics, as well as decisions made and not made by people in this town. Winchester's economy used to have thriving agricultural and industrial sectors. These are now gone, in part because of external forces, but also because this town made specific decisions about how it wanted to evolve. We've rezoned away most of the agricultural and industrial lands to housing so that we are overwhelmingly residential. Decisions and actions that led to that began many generations ago, and the repercussions have had a dramatic impact in reshaping not just how our land is used, but how we fund and manage town government and public services. It's not always, if ever, possible to predict how a given decision will work out over time. One of the challenges in town planning is the balancing of the needs of current residents with those of future generations. That's something the planning board deals with constantly, and its decisions are guided in part by the different views of the people on the board, but more importantly, what the residents of Winchester want. We're currently in the midst of developing a new town master plan, which will guide how the town manages and views its resources for the next decade. The most important inputs to that plan come from you, the town residents. Your visions and hopes for the future, coupled with the existing opportunities and constraints, will form a basis for the town's decisions, which will affect not just you, but all generations, also the generations that follow. The decisions in the past to convert industrial and agricultural land to residential use means that town revenues come predominantly from residential property taxes. Would that decision have been made if previous residents knew that in the future Prop 2.5 would constrain town revenue and spending, and that we would spend 65% of our budget on education? We don't know. What we do know is that Winchester, like our region, is in the midst of fundamental changes in our economy, our environment, and our demographics. Winchester in particular is becoming an ever more expensive place to find and keep a place to live. While we may tout the increasing values of our homes, 1 in 5 households in Winchester could qualify for affordable housing. Can we truly claim that we are doing well as a community with so many of our neighbors living on the edge? Some say that we are simply subject to the vagaries of the market, but it's not that simple. We have a great say in what values our community embraces and the policies that will enshrine our vision. The planning board is at the heart of that conversation, and through the master plan, informs the decisions that we will take. So, what can I bring to the planning board? I'm neither an architect nor a planner. I'm a scientist by disposition and an astronomer by training. I try to approach issues and decisions by examining them within their immediate context, as well as within the larger systems they are part of. I try to understand the origin of the patterns we see around us and to ascertain if the reasons for their existence are still relevant to our current and future needs. I see our society as a continuous evolving organism, and Winchester is a continuously evolving component which must respond to external and internal change in order to survive and flourish. I believe my responsibility as an elected official is to speak for those whose voices are not heard, and I believe that government's purpose and existence is to provide a foundation for the success of all people, to provide support when required, and encouragement at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation, help, and attention.